Yeah, there we go. There's sound. That's good, man. Appreciate you, bud. Oh, me. All right. Okay, man, it's amazing how much faster at that we've gotten, and surprisingly less awkward it is now than it used to be. Because that transition used to be really awkward, and they just go screaming everywhere, and so it's pretty good now. So, anyways, well, welcome out, guys, and it's we missed a week of our sermon series that we were in, so I wanted to take maybe just a few minutes and kind of reacclimate us to where we've been and kind of how we've been marching through the Bible, because it has been an incredibly aggressive study as we have moved through. We started January 1 or 2, whatever first Sunday in January was. We started then with this series where we were moving through the Bible. We spent 2 weeks in Genesis, then a week in Exodus, and just kind of moved on from there. And here's kind of what we've been trying to do. I do three things every single week. First is I give you a story overview. That is, who are the characters? What is the story arrangement? What is the literary devices that the author is using to convey some form of truth or something like that throughout this book? And then the second thing we've done is want to try to show you how to read the Bible well for yourself. And so if the story overview is the giving you a fish moment, then the study concepts is the teaching you how to fish for yourself moment of each sermon. And so we've given you Bible study techniques, and really a lot of it has just been reminding you of these tools that we have that we naturally use when we read the English language, but for some reason we throw out the window when we come to the Bible. And then finally, every week we've been looking at these pictures of Christ and the gospel. And that is the story behind the story. Like, all of the stories are leading to, culminating in, and sort of pointing our eyes forward to Jesus, his life, the cross, the grave, the resurrection, because that's the thing that has the power to change hearts and lives and eternities. That's the claim of the Bible anyways. And so we find our power in each of these stories in the ways in which they point our eyes forward to who Jesus is and how he is kind of moving in the world. So here's the deal. I got a new iPad this week. You guys are probably going to see me like struggling with that. And it just turned off, and I just realized a major boo-boo, which is I didn't like turn off the display sleep time. And I'm so embarrassingly bad at technology that it would take me like 10 minutes to figure that out right now. So anyways, you'll probably see me fiddling with this thing this morning. But back to the task at hand. So that's what we've been doing every single week. And this last week, before Easter, we were in the book of Ecclesiastes in the wisdom literature of the Bible. Now, we're going to continue on, still in the wisdom literature, but I wanted to take a second and define what biblical wisdom is. So if you're taking notes, this would be number one in your notes, that wisdom is the capacity of the mind to understand and live by God's view of reality. God's view, like God is the creator and author of the universe. If you hold to that view, much like a manufacturer kind of has a way in which that universe works best, right? And if you fall within the boundaries of that, sort of living along the grain of the universe, so to speak, then things work best. Joy is increased, right? God isn't some cosmic killjoy, and we're going to talk about that really at length today. But man, he actually is deeply concerned with that, and when we live by his view of reality, like we experience that to the greatest degree. And so that's really what wisdom is. And so we see this collection of books, and they touch on everything from marriage and family. Today we're going to talk intimacy, right? They talk about finances and work and friends and all of these different areas that require us to walk in wisdom of. And so that's sort of where we've been, and we're going to continue on today in that vein. But as we do that, again, I want to give a little bit of a Surgeon General's warning. I don't do this very often, but I do feel the need because we're going to be talking pretty openly about like sex and intimacy and that kind of stuff because that's Song of Songs, right? And so it's kind of funny as I looked at the calendar, I realized that like, dude, Easter you get a lot of visitors that come in, and then a lot of times they come back week 2, and I'm like, oh man, I have made a mistake here, right? Welcome back, week 1 of you being at the Outpost, and we're talking about sex. And so I just want to say that like this isn't an every week thing for us, but I do want to give the Surgeon General's warning. But I don't really see any kids left in here, so that's cool. But if this is a conversation you would want to retain to have with your kids, and like, dude, send them back to the back. Otherwise, like this is where we're headed, or maybe, and this is the other one, if you have some past, some trauma in this area, and this might be a little bit triggering for you, then just know that, like, dude, our lobby is open. So, I don't know, Matt, would you maybe just open that door for us? I know it's not, like, our norm, but if you need to, like, ever excuse yourself and go hang out so you can tune me out up in the lobby, like, feel free to do that, right? At any point, you guys go for that. But I want to begin this morning by setting the frame around this issue because I think we've gotten it wrong. And we're going to really talk at length about that. But I just think from the very outset, I want to take you back through a very elementary argument, but one that I think we've missed because, like, dude, this is, I don't know, just in our culture, the church culture even, for me, as I grew up, we missed some things. My parents missed some things, and we were at church every time the doors were open. So you would think things like this would be taught, and yet we've missed something foundational. So I want to go back to the foundation. The foundation is, if you have your Bible, it's Genesis 1:28. It's called the divine mandate. And here's what it says. God blessed them. I'm talking about Adam and Eve, those first two created, right? Adam and Eve, like God had blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. I don't need any explanation around that. Like, we're tracking what that means, right? Fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And so in this passage, God has just created man and woman and then gives them this command to come together in intimacy, right? He makes them he makes them with complementing parts, right? Like, go into that. I'm not going to do anatomy this morning, right? But like, he makes them with like complementing things that, like, as they work together, there is a beauty and a joy that is found in this thing. And here's the deal. Listen to me really closely, right? This is the point. Sex was God's idea, right? Like, let me read it. Sex was God's idea, but for some reason, that's not the feeling I got growing up in the church, right? And not just for procreation either. Here's as like graphic as it's going to get all morning, right? And then we're going to head towards easier waters after this, right? Like, so you bear with me for the next minute and a half, and we'll get through this whole thing, I promise. So, not just for like God created women to have some parts that he did not give men, right? We're talking anatomy responsible for pleasure, right? Technically listed under part of the reproductive system, but actually have zero function or evolutionary explanation for their existence, as they do not affect reproduction at all. So let me sum that up, man. If you hold a view of the world that God created everything purposefully and intentionally, then God not only designed sex as a way to bring forth new life, but also as a great gift meant to be simply enjoyed. Here's the deal, man. Like Satan didn't slip in after creation and be like, all right, Adam, I'm going to give you one of those, right? And that thing is going to lead you astray, and you're going to start some wars over that, right? And like, he didn't do, like, God didn't come down and like find Adam on top of Eve and like, whoa, what are you doing, man? Get off her, man. That's not what I gave you that thing for, right? Like, that didn't happen. This was God's idea. But man, like, here's the deal. It's awkward, right? Right now, I'm awkward. This is me awkward, right? And so, like, and here's the deal. Like, we've made it weird. We've made it weird. Why have we made it weird? Yeah, it's good. We're going to tackle it. So, but I think to answer that question, we have to answer another question first. So, is fire good or bad? And this is normally the part of the sermon where I would like stop and like I would say yes. It always gets a few chuckles, but I actually don't think this question is quite that simple. Fire is actually a great and terrible complex good. Right? Fire, like even a raging fire, can actually be a good, life-giving thing so long as it is in its proper context. That same fire that can keep you from freezing to death and clear the way for new life can be a source of unimaginable tragedy and death if it is taken outside of its proper boundaries. But even then, it's not really that simple, because even a raging forest fire, one that's responsible for loss of property, loss of life, actually, it still brings forth good and new life even out of the tragedy. I mean, I thought this was amazing. There's a seed, there's a type of seed that can't actually germinate until it's been burned. It's like that tree can't grow if there is overhanging like shrubbage or whatever. And so when forest fires come and clear the ground, something activates in that seed once it's been burned, and it can sprout and bring forth new life and sort of perpetuate the ecosystem, right? That's it's not simple. Like many things in our world, it is incredibly complex. So we've sort of labeled it as this terrible, great, complex good. And so it is with intimacy. But what has happened is we've made it awkward, right? When we separated ourselves from God's life-giving wisdom, His view of reality and how this thing sort of works, we've lost control. We've brought the fire outside of the fire. Some of us have been burned. Maybe some of us have burned other people in this area. We lost the thing that was so beautiful about how that story ends. If you read the end of Genesis chapter 2, man, they stood naked and unashamed in front of one another. And that's more than just physical nakedness, man. They knew one another deeply and were known by one another. Dude, this is a soul-level intimacy, and unashamedly so. Here's the deal. I think we sit at a crossroads here as a new church plant. So if you're with us and you know we're a church plant, we're a church plant. But I think we sit at a crossroads here at the Outpost. We get an opportunity to set sort of a new trajectory around this issue in the way that we talk about it, the way that we deal with it, not just as adults, but even to prompt us in the way that we deal with it with our children. I think we sit at a crossroads to set a healthier trajectory around this. Because here's the deal. Again, if you grew up like me, you didn't talk about this issue. Anybody else? That was your story? You grew up, we didn't talk about this. Right? And what happens, I think the absence of our healthy dialogue, in that absence, we have sought to shield our kids from this issue that is actually a really good thing. In the absence of that healthy view and regular dialogue, they are inclined to turn to an unhealthy view and desire given to them by a culture that is all too ready to convey its message. When we leave the vacuum around this issue, I think that oftentimes the inclination is that it is dirty and wrong. Listen to me really closely. I don't think that we've had too high a view of sex. I don't think that our culture values sex enough, actually. I think that our culture has far too low a view of intimacy, and they are settling for something far less pleasurable than what God actually intended. In the words of C.S. Lewis, right, our culture has been happy making mud pies in the sand when we've been invited to a banquet at the king's table. I think we need to be promoting a very high view of this amazing gift. So much so that, the stakes are high around it. Here are the burns and here are the scars that maybe some of us have carried around this issue. The stakes are really high, and this is a really good thing. I don't want to mess that up. We want to passionately pursue a very high level and high view of this thing, right? And here's sort of the reason why. Let's leave maybe the theological, go philosophical for a second. There's anybody familiar with the Westminster Catechism? They know what the catechism is? Okay, so it's a list of questions that sort of answer one question, and they come back around. They finally answer the question by the time they're done, and it's 1,000 pages long. And so if you haven't read it, then let me give you the thing that it's sort of leading to, and it's this. It's that that the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's our purpose. I like what John Piper said. He said, man, that the chief end of man is to glorify God by enjoying him forever. That, man, God is out for a level of joy and satisfaction in our lives. Not happiness, right? I don't have time to delineate, but happiness is cheap. I mean, I'm talking deep soul level satisfaction and joy. Like, God is out for that. Like, around this issue, God has placed barriers, man, not to kill joy, but to increase it. Because at the end, it actually becomes this thing that leads our hearts to worship him. But it requires wisdom. And for that, we have to go to the Song of Solomon. You guys good with that? All right. Song of Songs 1:1. If we're going to adopt that view, if we're gonna see really how God has sort of structured this thing, how it leads to greatest and highest joy, satisfaction, done right in a way that honors both our partner and God and our culture and our kids, our other relationships. Like, if we're going to do this the right way, it takes wisdom, and this is where Song of Songs actually comes in and offers a beautiful pathway of wisdom in this. So, if you have your Bibles, Song of Songs 1:1. We're going to just begin at the beginning of this. So, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. So, who in your Bible, if you have your Bible, has Song of Songs as a title? Anybody have Song of Songs as a title? Okay, a couple people. Anybody have something different? Song of Solomon in your title. Okay, so I've always been, I don't know about you, but this is really this has nothing to do with my sermon. It's just a total gee whiz thing. I've always wondered, why is it different in different books and stuff like that? And so I actually did a little research. I mean, dude, I've been studying this for a decade now, and I still didn't know. So here you go. Here's what I found out. Right. Song of Songs is actually the name of the book. So if you go read it in Hebrew, Song of Songs is the name of the book. Song of Songs is an idiom that means the greatest song ever written. So it's kind of like King of Kings or Lord of Lords, like the greatest out there, the best thing there. This is the best song around, right? And so the author of Song of Songs is not actually known. Which may be a little confusing given that the first sentence says the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, right? I could see how that would be, but hear me out here. One, there's some dating issues that make that a thing, but there's actually a couple other things. One, the main voice is a woman in the book, and we're going to meet three different voices that are going to speak to us in the book today. But the main voice is one, and the man's voice is obviously not Solomon's, right? And I'll talk about why here in a minute. Solomon is actually mentioned in the book, but he never speaks in the book. We don't believe that Solomon was the male voice for another reason, namely because Solomon had 700 wives, and it's pretty obvious from the text that you read that these two are the only two for one another. It would be a really big takeaway if at the end of the day Solomon's writes this amazing dense love poetry, and he's like, oh, by the way, you're just one of 699 other women and 300 concubines that I have. And so it's sort of like it would take away from that a little bit, right? Scholars actually believe that phrase, which is Solomon's, means that Song of Songs is in the wisdom tradition of Solomon, which is why we clump it into the wisdom books. And so Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, a lot most of that is Solomon's writings, and so in that same wisdom tradition is what this book falls in. That's kind of where they're going with that, right? Now let's talk story. As we get into our story overview, let's talk about how the story is arranged, and it is going to frustrate the mess out of you. All right, so there are two clear sections. There's an opening section. That is chapters 1, and it introduces us to the three voices that we will hear from in the book. And it sort of sets this tone for the desire that will define the rest of the book. All right, so that's chapter 1. We're going to meet these two lovers. They're not married yet, but it's very obvious that they are in hot pursuit of one another. And that's what the rest of the book is going to be about. Every once in a while, we're going to hear from their friends. And their friends are really kind of confusing because sometimes they're helpful and good, and sometimes they're not so helpful and maybe even damaged. So maybe it's not that confusing because that's kind of how our friends work too at times, I guess. And then the next section is at the very end of the book, chapters 8, verses 6 and 7, and it closes the book out with these powerful words of wisdom. Learn from the lover's pursuit of one another. So if you remember back to Ecclesiastes, right? We meet the teacher And he's sort of gloom and doom. It's super existential. And he goes through this thing, and it's like, dude, we're all headed to death. And so just eat, drink, and be merry, you know. And you're like, bro, what is wrong with you, right? And then at the end of the book, you have this editor that comes back in, and it's like, well, actually, here's what you need to learn from, like, he's saying some good things, but at the end of the day, this is what you need to know. And so Song of Songs works because it's in the wisdom tradition of Solomon. It has a very similar closeout at the end of it. So we'll look at that as well. But the middle section of the book is where we're going to spend the most of our time. The middle 7.5 chapters are what are going to frustrate some of you, right? At first glance, the middle 7.5 chapters seem to be a tangled mess without any rhyme or reason. There's missed opportunities. Again, there's friends who are helpful one second and encouraging, and then they're outright like unhelpful and even damaging the next. They miss one another. These two lovers are like two ships passing in the night at times. They seem to connect powerfully at other times, and as things are just starting to sort of heat up and get steamy, the scene breaks, and they're like apart from one another again. Times the woman comes to believe some things that are outright terrible and wrong about herself, that she's telling herself, or maybe that these other people are trying to confirm her in herself, and you can hear the frustration in her lover's voice as he is talking back to her in this. There's a moment where in the story where the woman is actually caught by some evil men and abused, man, and this weighs heavily on their relationship, man. The story doesn't seem to be arranged chronologically, and it's just all over the place. And here's what the point of this is. You see, even the seeming lack of story arrangement is communicating a truth in itself. It was intentional. And here's what we're meant to take away, I think, from this, is that that's how love works a lot of times, right? It's not neat and tidy. If you've been married for more than one season of marriage, then you know this to be true. There are definite high seasons. There are low seasons. There's moments where you seem to be, like, one of you seems to be really committed, and the other one is just like, doesn't seem to maybe be interested, or doesn't seem to have the same level of commitment as you do, or maybe you just feel like, man, we can never sync up, man. There are moments where, maybe I'm pursuing intimacy and friendship with my spouse, and there are other moments where she's pursuing it, and we're just like, we never hit each other in this. Anybody feel like that in the course of their marriage? There are people who come into our stories certain times and help, and at other times they're downright damaging. Some of us have taken damage. And guess what, man? That takes a toll on love and intimacy. At some point you have to reckon with that. But the beautiful thing about their story is that through it all, they never lose sight of their love for one another. Their story, although containing hurt, heartbreak, and even missed opportunities, isn't defined by those things. Tracking that? Like, it's not defined by those things. Their story highlights the beauty and triumph of love with a lifelong view inside and in spite of the dark days that they endure. Man, it is so easy to define like our love for one another, for our spouse, for our friendship, right? Maybe even for our kids, right? Like, it's easy to define that on the most recent difficult season. This is where we've always been. We always come back to this place. Anybody ever heard those words come out of their mouth, or thought those words, or whatever the case is? Like, so we're here again, right? And so we begin to define ourselves. And so what we do is we look forward to more seasons of the same in our most recent past hurt. And yet, I think what we see in this story is a looking forward to a future with one another. Look at this. This is chapter 1, verse 4. It's just a few verses down. Look at how it starts. Draw me after you, and let us run together. That is decidedly future tense hope. And the book is written almost entirely in this. It's constantly looking forward to. And again, we often think in terms like past terms, like past tense, most difficult recent season. And that's the view of our marriage that we take away from. What we're going to find out here in just a few minutes is that you're typically going to find what you're looking for. And so if you're looking for more of the same, there's always some of that to be had. And if that's how you define your marriage, is by the most recent difficult season that you've been in, and you expect more of the same in the future, Song of Solomon has given us the sort of clue that, like, you're going to find that. Now, what happens, though, when we both adopt a positive view of our future together and then begin moving towards that. It doesn't mean that hard times and lean seasons won't come. It simply means that you're less likely to define your relationship by those seasons. It means that we're going to call those broken things in our marriage what they are. We're going to deal with them, and we're going to get back on track pursuing what truly should be defining our love for one another. I could like camp out here for the rest of the sermon. We gotta really move on, right? The middle section of this book has three recurring themes, and we're going to spend most of our time looking at these three themes. And so even though it's scattered and it's all over the place, as you're going through, if you have these words, if you have these themes sort of in your mind, then what you'll notice is man, it just lily pads throughout the whole book, and they weave together in some really incredible ways. And if you're like a poetry nerd, you'll really love this book because they play off of one of there's parallelism, there's symmetry, there's some amazing literary like poetic devices that lead us to some really good stuff, right? But here's the deal. The first and most major theme that we're going to cover this morning in Song of Songs is that of love. Anybody shocked by that one? Anybody shocked? I don't, probably not, right? Super obvious. And here's the deal. We've done this for the Greek, but we got to do that for Hebrew. So you guys are going to Hebrew school this morning for just a few seconds, right? Because in the English language, we have one word for love, right? And so what we do is we rely on our culture and maybe the context around what we're saying to sort of define what we mean when we say love. Who in here loves coffee? Just raise them up, man. Just make sure you guys are still awake. Hey, well, there's actually a smaller number than I thought. So either some of y'all aren't being honest or you didn't raise your hands, right? I love coffee. Who in here loves their kids? Right? You see like pretty much every hand up on that one. But so here's the deal. Culture and context dictates that one of those things is a deeper and like more serious love than the other, right? And my own personal context says that if I'm going to love one of them, then sometimes the other one has to come first, and I'll let you work out what that is, right? Luckily, in Hebrew, we don't have to rely on context. There are three words for love that are really used and employed deeply in Song of Songs, and how they work together in the story that they weave in their interplay is what's awesome, right? So here's your first Hebrew word. The first word for love is ahava. Y'all say ahava. Ahava. All right. And it primarily deals with love as a commitment. So check this out in chapter 1, verse 7. We're going to hang in chapter 1 for most of the day, by the way, just letting you guys know. Here it is. It says, "Tell me, O you whom my soul loves, where do you pasture your flock?" So her lover, the male in the story, is a shepherd, right? Just kind of a little backstory in there. "Where do you make it to lie down at noon? For why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions?" Right? So here's what's going on. "Tell me, O you whom my soul ahavas, where do you pasture your flock?" That is to say, where are you and where can I count on you to be, because I'm going to be there. Right? I ain't hanging out near anybody else's flocks, right? You are the only one that my soul longs for, and I'm committed to being there, even if it's in the hot sun, even if it's about a bunch of, like, being around a bunch of, like, men who, like, spit and snort and make some noises and stuff, right? Like I'm going to be there, and I'm not going to be at anybody else's flock. This is the type of love that says, girl, if you leave me, you better buy 2 plane tickets because I'm coming too, right? I don't really believe in this whole speaking stuff into existence bit, but I will say that many people come into their marriage with a less than death do us part mentality. And believing you have an out often means you're willing to take it if things go south. I like this quote by Susie Kassem. She says, "Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will." If you substitute that word dream for the word marriage, you're near the heart of every marriage issue that I sit down with, right? I sit down and do counseling quite regularly around like marital issues and stuff like that. And it is their view about marriage, their commitment to like sort of marriage over the long term. Like that's what kills so many things, man. Everybody here has what I like to call the nuclear option. Anybody just already know what I'm talking about in their marriage? The nuclear option in your marriage? It's that final trigger we pull to either win or end an argument, or like turn it away from being, seeking resolution to now it's just war. You guys know when you make that switch in a fight? You guys know I like see some people poking each other and stuff. And like you do. You know when you make the fight. You know that thing you say where it's like, all right, well, we're not fighting to make things better now. We're just fighting to inflict damage, right? And so there's this point in the argument where and you kind of know where the other person is, and they got their hand like hovering over the button, right? And for a lot of people, it's that word like, I'm done, right? It's over. I'm out. Or maybe if you're feeling real froggy, right? Like, I want a divorce. Can we just like, here's it. Even though you may realize that the other person isn't heading to the divorce lawyer when they say that, can we just stop? Can we just, like, we could do that. We could agree upon that. We're all adults in here. We could do that right now when we say it. We could look at your spouse and say, we're just not going to do that. We're never going to do that. Like, those words are not coming out of my mouth ever again. Can we just move the nuclear football off the table for a second? Make it off limits in your marriage? Because, man, that is a cancer that will kill your marriage before it ever gets off the ground. Ahava love says, I'm not going anywhere, and you aren't going anywhere, so we better figure this thing out. It is a commitment settled in your soul that you are in this thing for the long haul. Here's ahava. Second type of love is raya love. Everybody say raya. Raya, yeah. Second type of love is raya love, and it's about friendship. Companionship love, that's another way to say it, right? Song of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 7, we see an example of raya. It says, you are altogether beautiful, my darling, my raya. Some of your versions have my love right there, right? It'll even use the word love sometimes in English for that. There is no blemish in you. There is no blemish in you. What's in sight here is a friendship type of love. There's this moment with, I've had it with my wife pretty regularly. And sometimes it's like we'll be hiking, maybe we'll just be laying in bed reading a book, and I'll look over and like, dude, I am so stinking lucky. Like, I like you. Like, and so I'll tell her that. I'll be like, hey, I really like you, And so she knows that I love her, right? Like, she understands. But actually, in that moment, there's something deeper going on. Like, I enjoy being with you. You're home. You're safe. You are, dude, you're my companion. Like, you're my friend. I like being with you. And in some ways, man, that's a higher compliment than I love you at times. Like, I enjoy, like, going on hikes with you, which is crazy, because we're going to talk about how the fact I've been married to, like, 3 different women, and their names have all been Danielle Wood, but like, I enjoy growing in this life and in our story together with you. This is the type of love that takes work and development over time. Now, finally, the word dode, everybody say dode, yeah? It's used to describe passionate love, desire, intimacy. This is like sexual love, right? Now, what's amazing about these concepts is that they weave together like a 3-stranded cord. You never find one without the other. They're close by. They play off of one another in the structure of like the literature of the book. So what happens is you're going to see friendship and commitment. You're going to see raya and ahava love. They build up and they build and they build and they build to this point where it just sort of explodes into this dode love. Not the other way around. Without all 3 of these, all we are left with is dode. Right? It's flesh. So our culture has failed to adopt a high enough view of intimacy, man. So it is history of partners. It is better technique, more pleasure, more people involved in that. Whatever you like without the intimacy of friendship and commitment, all we are left with is flesh. And dude, it is such a low view of what intimacy is supposed to be. Well, it says, no, actually, when you do it the way I have designed, when it is the overflow of deep commitment, companionship, and friendship in your marriage, man, this thing, it will quench, it will satisfy something in your soul that dode alone can never do. It's like fire. Again, let's go back to fire, right? Like, you can make fire a couple of ways. You can just pour some gasoline in a bucket and you can light it up. That's a really easy way to make fire, right? It'll have the appearance of substance. It'll be hot. It'll burn hot and bright, but it's over quick. And the danger of it getting out of control and burning you is incredibly high. That's dode without raya and ahava. The best fires, the fires that really last and produce heat, that are good for something, are the ones that are built on a strong bed of coals. Those fires are much harder to extinguish and burn with a much greater intensity and heat for much longer. The problem, however, is making a gasoline fire requires very little effort, like we've already said. Nice bed of coals, however, takes work, takes someone to nurture it and tend to it over time, but the end result is so much greater. It may seem backwards if we take this concept out of its context, but man, this is why the Bible says that sex within marriage is like a beautiful thing. I know that kind of like puts us like backwards and at odds with culture a little bit, but I mean, like, that's just going to happen at times. Now, I don't think that becomes a weapon that we beat people over the head with, or sort of like heap guilt and shame over people who didn't do that or didn't go that way. Like, man, that wasn't my story, right? Like, and I know a lot of your stories. That wasn't your stories either, right? Like, but man, I think this is why it says, and I can see it now, a decade in, right? Like 12 years, going on 13 years now of marriage. I can see how building raya and ahava over a period of time and letting that thing sort of flourish into dode would have been so much better. I wish I could go back, man, but you can't put it in the box, right? Doesn't mean that like what went forward wasn't good, but I think this is why. When dode, or sexual passion love, is the culminating expression of companionship and commitment love, it produces a joy much deeper than passion alone can produce. It is the highest form of being fully known and knowing another person. Let's return to that moment in the garden where we stood naked and unashamed before one another. That's concept one. Concept two we see is the theme of pursuit, if you're taking notes. Multiple times in the book, we read things like this. This is chapter 5, verses 6 through 8. It says, I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and had gone. My heart went out to him as he spoke. I searched for him, but I could not find him, right? Called to him, but he did not answer. The watchmen who make the rounds in the city, they found me. They struck me and wounded me. The guardsmen of the walls took away my shawl from me. She's in a pursuit of this. And then here's what she says. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, as to what you will tell him, say this, I am lovesick. I'm in pursuit of him. Let me make this point really easy and straightforward, and I'm going to make it in the form of a question. When was the moment that you realized marriage and intimacy was going to take work to sustain? Think about that. When was the moment? And here's my point. The point is that you notice I didn't say, was there a moment when you realized that? Because if you've been married more than like a day, you got probably a new married couple, it takes work, right? It's what, 2 weeks now? Week and a half? Been married? It was awesome, man. By the way, yeah. It takes work. Sorry, man. There's 3 guys out there. The problem is that we get lazy. And we stop pursuing our spouse. Like men and women, look at me, both of you. It is both of our jobs to pursue one another. We get that like decidedly in the text. There are moments where she is pursuing and chasing after him, and there are moments where he is pursuing and chasing after. It's both of our jobs. I don't know what else to call it but fatigue. Right? We begin with such passion and pursuit, and somewhere along the way we get tired. We get tired of fighting for our beloved's heart. We get tired of being creative. We get tired of seeking new ways to bring them joy and make them feel cherished, and we just get tired. Now, fire again, fire. This is why it uses this. It's a really great metaphor for this type of pursuit. A good fire takes fuel. And if you stop nurturing, you stop tending to it, stop putting logs on it, it grows cold and eventually it goes out. Now, think back to the early days when you were married. Like nobody had to convince you to throw logs on the fire, like the metaphorical fire, did they? Man, it was sweet notes that you left for one another. It was these little things. It was seeking to know your spouse. This is what it was, really. At its root, it wasn't what you did, but it was the motivation and thing that pushed you to do it was you were seeking to know and love your spouse well, to know them. What makes them feel loved and cherished? Do you know that? It's really kind of key because what we're inclined to do is love people the way that we like to be loved, don't we? I don't really care about gifts all that much, but Danielle does, and so she gets me gifts. It's like that's great, and I love it's great, but that's not my thing. My thing would be like spending some time together, like being like it's gonna sound bad. It's not that she doesn't like to spend time with me, but like intimacy, physical touch, those kinds of things, and it's like it's kind of how the cookie crumbles a lot of times. And it's like, man, if I try to give that out as like the main expression of my love, then it's like, well, again, that's great and that's awesome, but at the end of the day, that's how I receive it best. The pursuit we see in Song of Songs is a mutual pursuit. In other words, how do you continually outdo one another in mutual affection? If you're putting the other's needs and desires above yourself, and they are doing the same, the outcome is beautiful. Again, I've been married to like 3 different women, and all their names has been Danielle. And I was thinking about this last night as I was thinking about this illustration. Danielle, version 1.0, loved to read on the beach. And so it was really good because we lived down in Florida. And so if I wanted to like cherish her, well, it was like, dude, take her to Barnes and Noble and then like go and take the kids on the beach and just let her like hang, bake like a little, apple crisp underneath the umbrella for a few hours, right? That was dude, that was it, man. That was good. It was good stuff. Now, like Danielle 3.0 likes to hike, and Danielle 1.0 did not like to hike. In fact, she hated outdoors if it wasn't under the beach with like a fan on and that kind of stuff, right? Like Danielle 2.0 was really big into the exercise scene. So some of you guys, I think y'all missed that phase of her too. But 3.0 loves to hike, all right? And so we bought a camper. That was cool. And we hang out on the beaches now again, but it's different. It isn't with a book under the umbrella. It's hiking and picking up rocks and things like this. And so it's like, dude, as we just walk down the beach together and we spend time together, like, dude, this is love and cherishment to her. But here's the problem, man, is like about every 3 to 5 years, you become a different person, and so do they. And when we get tired, we get fatigued, and we take our eyes off of our spouse, and maybe we add in some career in between. So, we start out holding hands, and it's really strong, but we add career, or maybe we add a couple of kids, and we add maybe a hobby or two that isn't, aligned with one another. And one day, what happens is the kids move, or the careers end, or whatever the case, and you're so far away, and they've become a different person. It's just as a side note, right? Like, you know how the book of Song of Songs ends? It ends, the final note is they're separated once again and they're looking for it. It's this very open-ended, like closing to the book. And that's sort of how love works. This is to say that the pursuit never ends. Does the pursuit end? Jake and Patsy, right? How many years do y'all celebrate? 51. Next Sunday? Whoa, holy smokes, dude, y'all should tell me about that. We'll definitely be doing something for that. But anyway, so 51 years next Sunday, man. Like, does the pursuit end? Pursuit end. Does it end? How are you pursuing? Man, and this is one of those things that you can just be really practical with. Set a time for the next 30 days. Next 30 days, man, I want to seek to know my spouse here. I want to seek to pursue them, to cherish them on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, maybe even on a monthly basis. I want to cherish them and let them know this. And what happens if they're doing the same thing? And so all of a sudden now you don't have to worry about, am I going to be cherished the way that I want to be cherished? Because, man, they got that covered. And they don't have to worry because you've got them covered. That's the beauty of this. Finally, we see the joy of attraction. We need to move in our study concept because this is what's going to help us do this. Yeah, I'm just going to tell you, we're probably going to go a few minutes long. You guys go with that? It's all right stuff. So we'll go a little long today. And so here it is. Song of Songs 4, 1 through 4. Here's what he says. How beautiful you are, my darling. How beautiful you are. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats. Anybody? Yeah? stuff, right? That have descended from Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn ewes, sexy, right? Which have come up from their washing, all of which bear their twins. And that's good too, right? Not one among them has lost her young. Your lips are like a scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your temples are like a slice of pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck, guys, don't go there on this one. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with rows of stones on which are hung 1,000 shields, all the round shields of the mighty men, right? Steamy, right? And so here's these are the type of passages that people typically think of when they think of Song of Songs. Everybody? Like you've read through and we get the chuckles and they're talking about, different things. And I won't, but this is the passages that people typically think of when they think about Song of Songs. And it's really great and amazing stuff. But I think to get it right, we have to talk about poetry for just a second. Because, guys, the takeaway is don't tell your wife that she has a belly like a heap of wheat, right? Because it's in there. She probably won't appreciate that, right? See, the use of metaphor in biblical poetry is incredible. And it might be fairly evident when it comes to passages like this, but for some reason, when we come to other stuff, we sort of lose, we lose mind of that. When you see words like or as, the modern biblical translators are keying you into the fact that metaphorical or simile language is being employed by the author. So those words like and as typically aren't there in the original Hebrew or Greek, and that's just the modern author is trying to give you a leg up on what's going on. This is metaphor. She doesn't really have eyes that look like doves, right? Her belly doesn't look like a heap of wheat, and her temple doesn't look like pomegranates, right? But what this does mean is that there are multiple levels of meaning at play. Like, don't lose me. I know it's going to start out elementary, but it gets deeper, right? There are multiple levels of meaning at play. For instance, when we read that she has lips like scarlet, obviously maybe he's commenting on the color of her lips, right? Deeper than that, scarlet was a luxury to be enjoyed by only the rich, like true, real scarlet was. He's commenting on more than just her appearance. He's talking about her dignity, maybe even the beauty of her speech, as he brings her mouth into view in this. I picked this passage on purpose because I love your hair looks like a flock of goats bit. And I was just wanted to talk about that one. Right? Her hair being like a flock of goats coming down from Gilead is definitely talking about the way her hair is maybe long, black, wavy as it flows over her shoulders. But on a deeper note, Gilead goats are incredibly rare. Michaela, do you know that? Gilead goats are incredibly rare. These Gilead goats produce a type of wool not found in any other species of goats and is beyond comparison in its beauty and its rarity. His comment here is aimed at the uniqueness of her beauty, not shared by any other woman out there. She is definitely the only one for him, and her unique beauty captivates him in a way that nothing else can. You guys get all that from the flock of goats bit, right? That's why metaphor in poetry is good to know, right? Also, did you notice, this is fun, did you notice the order in which he is describing her? Biblical scholars, much smarter than I have come to the conclusion that this moment that we just read is the first time they are standing in front of one another on their wedding night, right? And it gets pretty hot the further you go down through there. But did you notice what he does? When he starts up here, he's talking about her hair, and he moves down to her eyes and her temples, and he talks about her teeth and her mouth, and then he moves on down to her neck. One guess as to what he comments on next. Don't say it out loud. But you're totally free to look in your Bibles and see if you are right about that. And so here's the deal. The idea is that he is slowly, carefully, thoughtfully working his way over every aspect of his beloved. Not just her physical beauty, but also the deeper aspects of her character. And he's reminding himself and his beloved why she captivates him. Here's the takeaway, right? Let's just quickly move into it. You need to become an expert in your spouse's strengths and beauty. Now, I love this church because we have so many young, married couples around here, people about to get married. There's something amazing about our beauty to see those lovely, captivating things about our future spouse or our new spouse, like early on, right? You guys definitely know where I'm I'm heading with this. But then one day, you've lived together for a little bit, and you find out they don't know how to shut cabinet doors. Maybe been there? Yeah? For some reason, they can't make their clothes into the basket, and it's right there, right? That was a dig at me, so that's like, Danielle, if you're watching this, she ain't here today, so if you're watching this, like, that's me, right? It's sitting right there. Why does he use the same towel for 3 days, right? Dude, can you not smell what that thing begins to, like 3-4 days in, that thing takes on, all right, whatever. Why does he make that gross noise when he's falling asleep, when he's first falling asleep, right? Why does he make that weird sound with his mouth? Anybody have that thing? Yeah. Why are they so impatient with the kids? Why can't he see the progress that they're making? Why does she have to always call and run to mom and dad as soon as things go sideways? Why doesn't she appreciate the extra hours I am working, right? This is for you. It's for our children. Why can't she appreciate that? She never appreciates that. Why can't he ever respect the budget that we agreed on? Y'all listen to me really closely. It's so easy to come to define your spouse. And by the way, not just your spouse, right? Like, let's bring friendship. Let's bring our kids in. Let's bring our coworkers, people that we're in relationship. But this morning we're talking spouses mostly. You know that all that other stuff is in view here, right? It's so easy to define your spouse by only the worst aspects about them. And pretty soon, if that's the only narrative running through your head, it's the only thing that you rehearse to yourself and to your spouse, like, pretty soon, what's the point? That isn't who I married. We lose sight of the beauty, the things that captivated our hearts in this. Let me give you a little pro tip here. This one's free. You didn't have to pay for this. Stop dealing in superlatives. You know what a superlative is? You always do that. You never do that. Man, I wish I always did anything. Right? I'm not that consistent. I don't always do anything. Like, stop dealing. Like, your spouse doesn't always or never do anything. And there are little practical steps you can take in this. The challenge here is to know your spouse. This is a beautiful invitation. Nobody else in the entire world knows them as intimately as you do. They are a beautiful creation inside and yet out, and yet the only thing that they ever hear rehearsed from you is all of their faults. Listen to me, man. They isn't just the man to the woman. This is both of them. She rehearses these things to him. He rehearses. They rehearse these things in front of their friends too. There's a lesson in that, right? Like, those people that like are okay talking negatively about your spouse, man. Like, if that's the case, dude, that should be like big red flag there, right? But hey, look here, girl, right? Like, I just want you to know you rocked it at baseball practice today. Man, you're like the team mom of the year. The other girls giving like fruit snacks and Sunny D, man. He's making homemade Lunchables and fresh squeezed lemonade. Ain't nobody else doing that, girl. Right? Man, I love the way. Right? It's maybe funny, but for those of you who have kids in that, and it's like, do not that like captivate. It's like you put an effort into something. It's like, dude, it's one of the things I find beautiful about you. And I love the way you play with our kids at the park. The care and concern, the gentleness that you're able to take on in your dealing with our kids when maybe every other area of your life calls you to be kind of hardened and forceful, but somehow, like, I love watching you break down into this thing where you're vulnerable, you're soft, you're gentle with our kids. Man, I just want you to know I love that about you. You get the chance to regularly with your spouse do exactly what we just saw in this passage, and we don't. Anybody else like grow up like thinking about, this may be weird, but whatever. Anybody else grow up thinking about like, I get to have a sleepover with this person like every night, right? And yet I spend there are nights we get in bed. Tell me if you guys do this. Like, we get in bed and then we kind of like grunt and then turn the opposite way. And what I start getting to know is like Becky in the HOA group who's mad at her next door neighbor that the cat is breaking into their trash, right? That's what I'm getting to know instead of this woman that I was so excited to know and like have a 50-year sleepover with for the rest of my life, and she's sitting 6 inches from me. That's why commitment, friendship, in this type of intimacy, it's why it's so important. It has to be undergirded by those things. Pursue your spouse. Know your spouse deeply and regularly rehearse their beauty and their strengths both inside and out. All right? Let's go. Let's go back to our story overview for just a second, right? I want to close it out with 2 things. 8, 6 through 7 gives us this concluding idea about love. And again, remember, it's more than just sexual intimacy love. This is friendship love. This is commitment love. Has this in view. But here's what it says. It says, put me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death. Jealousy as severe as Sheol. Its flashes are flashes of fire. That's where a lot of the fire imagery comes from. The very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, nor will rivers overflow it. If a man were to give all the riches of his house for love, it would be utterly despised. He'd be broke. He couldn't do it, which is crazy because in the very next story, Solomon tries to do the very thing that this says that you can't, right? He tries to pay for love, and she rejects him, and she turns, and she's looking for her beloved, and that's how the story sort of ends, right? And there's 3 or 4 things really happening here, but I want to look at one in particular that I think is relevant to us. I think that's the danger and complexity of love. If you're taking notes. Love is a fiery flame and is as strong as death. Many waters cannot quench love. God has given us some amazing wisdom about love and intimacy. Think of that like guardrails that allow us to enjoy it in greater ways than if we try to chart our own path in our own wisdom around the subject. God isn't the cosmic killjoy, but is genuinely trying to keep us safe in this area and increase joy that leads to our worship of the one who gave it to us. It's where it terminates on. God isn't trying to hand out invitations to a bonfire at the burn ward, right? He doesn't want us burned up over these issues. He's trying to save us, and if you've ever been burned in this area, then you know how those burns stay with you. You know what they do over time. Couple of quick points on this, man. First and foremost, man, there is healing in Jesus if you have been burned in this issue. If you have been burned in this area, man, there is hope for your future, and there's healing in this. These are things that I know firsthand. These are things that I know from walking with people and seeing the healing that has come. I mean, I would encourage you to seek help if that is you. And I would love to be the one to begin that conversation or point you in the right direction to where hope can be found. And then secondly, here's maybe the other sort of end of that spectrum. Some of you are juggling lit torches over a swimming pool full of gasoline. Dude, I'm sorry, man. This makes me really probably old school, and I'm gonna get just old Baptist pastor for a second, right? This thing is nuclear, man. I know very few grown adult men that navigate that with wisdom and care required to not burn their house down. And yet, man, we give our kids unfettered access to that. My wife is a technology teacher. And so I get a weekly expose on the outworkings of that in our culture. It is terrifying. It's terrifying. I mean, I'm talking like I have seen the wreckage done to families when adult men play with the fire over the gasoline, and yet we're giving it to kids. Unfettered, open access. You know what Jesus says about this issue is like, dude, if there's something that's going to cause you to stumble, like, cut that thing off, cut that hand off. If there's an eye that causes you, man, like, gouge. And he's using hyperbole, obviously. Like, he doesn't want a bunch of one-eyed people walking around here, right? Isn't what he has in view of that. But it's like, operate in wisdom, and don't allow yourself like so close to the guardrails or over the guardrails like of this issue where there's fire happening. Like, don't go where fire's. And so if this thing is the thing that's sort of pulling you into the fire, then like, dude, get rid of it. Some of you need a stupid phone, man. I'll just say that. Like, I'll close with our picture of Christ in the gospel. We'll end it with this. Because I think this is really the key to all of it. Look, some of you have tried, haven't you? You've been to the seminars, you've read the books, whatever the case, you've been motivated and like, rah, 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 this is so exciting. And it's like, it is exciting. And maybe that's sort of your feeling. So I don't want to like pop your balloon in that if that's you and you're like, really, like, go for it. I'm telling you to go for it. But some of you have went for it in the past and it didn't work out. So actually, I think the key to this is in this picture of Christ. This is the thing Romans chapter 1 says is the power of God for salvation and everything else. So how have people related this book over time to deeper aspects of faith? And so in the early Jewish tradition, or the Hebrew tradition, this was about people's love for God. This was an allegory for how we loved God and all that. Luckily for us, we have kind of a different rendition on this. And from very early on in church history, this has been a picture of how Jesus loved us. Jesus loved church. It's what's in view when we read this in Paul's passage, Ephesians chapter 5. Here's what he says: husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, have no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. So husbands ought also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. And he actually goes so deep into this metaphor, reaching back to Song of Songs, that at the end he's like, oh, also, and husbands, definitely do love your wives, But really, what all of this is pointing to is Jesus. Song of Songs has traditionally been seen as an allegory for how Jesus loves us and gave himself in pursuit of us. What's one of the major themes? Song of Songs? It's pursuit, right? It's Paul's words here in Ephesians. That Jesus went to great lengths in his pursuit of us. There was nothing that Jesus wasn't willing to give in his pursuit of us. Much like the ending of Song of Songs says, no amount of money could buy love. Only his life could do that. But let me just address like the singles in the room for a second, right? I know we've talked a lot about love and intimacy between spouses, but I don't want you to leave thinking that if you aren't married, or maybe that isn't even in the plans for you, that you're somehow less than or incomplete. Like, not at all. Paul actually, the same guy who wrote this about marriage, said, I wish more of y'all were single, actually, at the end of the day. The type of commitment, companionship, and soul-level intimacy that Songs is pointing us to is really meant to be lived out in all of our relationships. It's just that marriage becomes maybe one of the clearest pictures of it. We're meant to see how Jesus first loved us. In 1 John tells us this, that because he first loved us in this way, this deep, intimate friendship, passionate commitment, pursuing type of love that he pursued us, like it frees us to love him, to love others back with a fiercely intense, world-changing kind of love. The kind of love that gives itself seeking nothing in return. That's the kind of love that Jesus had for us, and it's the kind of love that defines his kingdom. Our love for him and one another is the greatest picture of what life in his kingdom is like. So man, if you've never experienced that, we got a cat in the room, and I love it. So good. If you've never experienced that kind of love, man, I want to begin that conversation with you today. And here's the major takeaway. We'll close it out. If you find it hard to love your spouse, your kids, friends, if you find it hard to pursue them, if you maybe find it a little bit difficult to find the words or whatever to rehearse the beauty inside and out of your spouse, the solution isn't to just try harder in this. The solution is to look back at the one who first loved you with a love so powerful that he gave his life for it. As you come to be transformed by that love, it will spill out into all of your relationships, beginning with your marriage. You want to solve the marital issues. You go back to the gospel. Man, Song of Songs gives us some patterns. Pursue your spouse, rehearse these things. Those are good things, but the thing that gives the power and that motivates us and moves our heart to change is the gospel. It is recognizing the way that he first loved us and gave himself for us. Dude, that reality, submitting to that reality, trusting in Jesus for that is the thing that changes your heart in ways that nothing else can. So again, if that's you, maybe the solution to some of the things going on in your marriage isn't a better technique. It isn't more flesh. It isn't more whatever. Maybe the best thing that you could do for your marriage is come back to the gospel and let that wash over you anew. So I don't know where you walked in here at, but man, I encourage you to take that step, whatever that may be, and that's why we exist here at the Outpost, to help people take whatever that next step of faith and faithfulness is. All right, we went way too long. You guys good? Song of Songs. Everybody like that? Good stuff? Song of Songs, man, it is awesome. And so I encourage you to read that this week. I could recommend some good books to kind of go along with that if you're interested in that. And maybe as a side note, I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag here. We're talking about doing a marriage seminar, and a lot of it will come kind of from this stuff in the fall. And we may do it even before then. We're trying to do it in an overnight thing. We're trying to get Cascades Bible Camp, but that's expensive. I don't know. We'll work it out with you guys. But that is something over the horizon that we're looking at right now. So some of you guys, it could be a few $100s per person to go. It'll be something you bring your kids to. They'll disappear and you won't see them all week, or all weekend. But will be something that we're trying to put on. So you guys be thinking about that now. And I think that's it. So tell you what, let's pray, and you guys are dismissed. Father God, we love you. We thank you that you first loved us. Father, we just thank you that love changes the world. Thank you for the ways that it has changed my heart, and it's continually changing my heart and Danielle's heart, knitting us together as one flesh, one heart as we come and pursue you together. Guys, pray that this material would begin to work its way into the hearts, lives of our married couples, just people who have friends, kids, and coworkers. God, that Father, your word speaks such a good word to us. Thank you for it. I just thank you for this week. Just